I'm going to talk a lot about the human factor of fear and aggression and how that plays into all of it. Sarah's going to go into the nuts and bolts and the emotional part of it, the science part of it, and the actual physical training and what we do to work through all the fears and aggression. She has some amazing videos that you're going to love with different species, as well as dogs. So what happens with fear and aggression and how does that affect the dog and human relationship in the equation is what I want to talk about. Many behaviors are survival behaviors, and Storm, the whatever breed he was, who knows, was a really good example of the survival instincts that are within our dogs. And many of them are because there is a lack of trust between the human and the animal that we do see a lot of these survival and innate behaviors come out. Because we need to build that trust if we're going to work with fear and aggression in whether it's your own dog, whether you're professional, it doesn't really matter. So it's always good to keep in mind, and we talked about this a little bit yesterday, that until you build a huge cavity and fill that cavity with trust, it's always going to be instinct and survival before obedience and compliance. You need to build that trust, and that's the stuff we're going to talk about, and how sometimes that's difficult to do as human beings. Further, with Dr. Lucer's description, the concept of conflict-related aggression has profound implications. It challenges us to interpret the social relationship between dogs and the owners in a more sophisticated way than the dominant, submissive relationship, which I think is really important. We need to be more creative. It's the one thing, I think everybody's pretty aware that I'm a positive reinforcement trainer, that I find really kind of limiting with old compulsion style training, is it's not creative. It's the same answer for everything. You pop them, you punish them. Sometimes you praise them. But there's no variation. Those of us that work in this field that work really hard to step out of that and work in positive reinforcement, despite some of the criticism we get, we look for a lot of creative ways to deal with these animals that come to us that are suffering from the conflict-related aggressions with their owners. Here's kind of my take on reactivity and fear. I think these things make for what I call myopic dogs. Dogs that have this whole tunnel vision about how they deal with the world in their life. That's all they really see. When this happens, I do this. When this happens, I do this. Over and over and over. They're not creative. They don't think outside the box. They don't have very good tools. They're not able to think clearly because they're facing ongoing stressors. And when you get those stressors, they build. And the hormones that flush through the body when stressors happen, good or bad stressors, continue to accumulate in the body, and then you have dogs that really are not thinking clearly at all. They respond with behaviors they know. That's where we often see a lot of puppy behaviors come back into play when a dog is frustrated that has very few tools in their toolbox to deal with life and to be able to cope. The dogs that I find most frustrating for me because they hurt are those ones that revert back to those puppy behaviors. A lot of jumping, a lot of biting, a lot of tugging at clothes, a lot of zoomy stuff. And the bigger the dog, the more serious those sort of things kind of happen. So we really want to be able to, help these dogs get a bigger view of the world, to be able to open up and have other choices, to be able to see that the whole world has some possibilities other than what they're doing.
Okay, we have our overview of topics. Goal setting is my first section. Oh, by the way, that's my Keith, little Rottweiler, and my Sajira next to him, and Sweet Ella, and Elwood, my best friend's dog, and little Florian. Every dog, I think every animal in this presentation that I've used for the backdrops, first of all, they're all animals I've worked with, without exception. And secondly, I think all of them have had some degree of fear or aggression to overcome. And I would say most of them have overcome it quite nicely. So What's going on under the hood is our second section. Some basic information, get us some background, learning principles. So no matter what techniques we use, there are some underlying principles. I don't pretend to be able to describe all of them, but I can say that the techniques I'm going to talk about today are the ones that I use over and over again with my clients that make the biggest difference in their success. And so again, just to emphasize, this is not to say that I'm anti-cognition or any of that. These are just some really useful techniques for actually, bread and butter, helping our animals, helping our dogs. So some of the principles that have been most useful to me and my clients. Management deconstructed. You'll find out what that means. And nuts and bolts. Some of the how-tos. Obviously, we can't do all of the how-tos. I will say now, and I'll say it again, that animals with fear and aggression, as Nan said, need really a higher level of training, because training is communication, and good communication is clarity. And they need clarity more than anything else. And they need a really clear pathway of communication with us, because we are their interface. We're the ones that have a roadmap for getting them out of their fear and their aggression. So training, very, very important, and also fun, and develops the brain and all the other things that Nan talked about. Don't allow an expert to put more on this, false limits on what your dog can achieve. As much as we'd all like concrete answers, trainers don't have a crystal ball or a manual in their back pocket. Ultimately, the trainer is an important resource, but you need to make the decisions which are right for you. And you have to see the positives to reinforce the positives. The clients that I have who seem to do the best, I've realized over time, are the ones who see the positives. As they go along, they encounter challenges, but they still see the progress. The ones who get acclimated and forget the progress, they can suddenly throw away everything they've done. They can become demotivated. They can fail to be motivating to their dog. All sorts of things can happen, which I may have written here. Let's see, it's essential to know what to reinforce and what to nurture. Okay, yes, the person who recognizes the progress they're making in the short term will continue to do the work and achieve the long-term results. The dog whose owner celebrates her successes and progress, even when life is still challenging at times, will do better because of the reinforcement and consistency the owner provides.